Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. 3 years of deep space patrol had taught him to read the void like an old book. Tonight, something felt wrong. "Captain, I'm getting some strange readings on the long-range sensors," said Commander Lisa Hayes from her station. Her fingers danced across the control panel, trying to make sense of the data flooding her screens. Jake walked over to her station and leaned down to look at the display. The numbers didn't make sense. Ships were appearing on the edge of their sensor range, but they weren't moving like any vessels he'd ever seen. They pulsed and twisted through space like living things. "How many?" Jake asked. "I count at least 50, sir. Maybe more. They're big, Captain. Really big." Jake had been in space long enough to trust his instincts. Whatever was coming their way wasn't friendly. He activated the ship's communication system and connected to Terra Command on Earth. "Admiral Collins, this is Captain Morrison aboard the Defiance. We have unknown contacts approaching human space. Request immediate backup." The response came back crackling with static. "Morrison, this is Collins. We're getting reports from all over the outer rim. Something's happening out there. Get me eyes on those ships and report back." Jake turned to his crew. "All hands to battle stations. Lisa, get me a visual on those contacts." The main screen flickered to life, showing the approaching fleet. What Jake saw made his blood run cold. The ships weren't built, they were grown. Massive organic structures that looked like diseased organs floating through space. Dark energy crackled around their hulls, and they moved with a fluid grace that no mechanical ship could match. "Dear God," whispered Lisa. "What are those things?" Before Jake could answer, the communication array lit up with an emergency signal from Kepler 442b, a mining colony with 10,000 people. "This is Colony Director Sam Murphy on Kepler 442b. We have hostile ships in orbit. They're not responding to our hails. Something's wrong with their energy signatures. It's like they're eating the light around them." The transmission continued for another few seconds before Murphy's voice changed, becoming high and panicked. "They're landing. The ships are opening up and something's coming out. Oh God, they're not wearing suits. They're breathing our air. How are they breathing our air?" Static filled the channel. Then came the screaming. Jake had heard men die in battle before, but this was different. These weren't the quick shouts of soldiers in combat. These were the long, drawn-out wails of people experiencing something beyond pain. The sounds went on for nearly 10 minutes before cutting to silence. "Get me Admiral Collins," Jake ordered. When the connection opened, Collins looked older than he had an hour ago. "Morrison, we've lost contact with 17 colonies in the last hour. Whatever these things are, they're hitting us everywhere at once." "What are your orders, sir?" "Get to Kepler 442b and find out what we're dealing with. The science ship UES Horizon is already en route with their xenobiology team. Link up with them and give me some answers." The Defiance arrived at Kepler 442b 6 hours later. The colony was still there, but something was terribly wrong. The settlement's lights were on, but they pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. The mining equipment was still running, but it had been converted into something else entirely. Dr. Amanda Foster from the Horizon contacted Jake as soon as both ships were in orbit. "Captain Morrison, we're reading massive biological activity on the surface. Whatever attacked this place, they didn't destroy it, they changed it." "Changed it how?" "The entire colony appears to have been converted into some kind of organic structure. The buildings are still there, but they're covered in what looks like living tissue. And Captain, we're detecting human life signs down there." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Survivors? I don't think so. The biosignatures are human, but they're wrong somehow, like they've been altered." The landing party found the truth 3 hours later. The colonists were alive, but they were no longer human. Their bodies had been twisted and changed, fused with alien technology that pulsed with dark energy. They moved with jerky, unnatural motions, but their eyes still held traces of human awareness. One of them approached the landing party. It had been a young woman once, but now her skin was covered in metallic scales that shifted and moved like living armor. When she spoke, her voice was a mixture of human speech and something else entirely. "Help us," she whispered. "Please, help us. We can still think, but we can't control what we're doing. They're in our heads, they're making us build things, terrible things." Jake's security chief, Lieutenant Mike Davis, raised his weapon, but Jake stopped him. "What are you building?" he asked the creature that had once been human. "Ships," she replied. "We're building ships to attack your other colonies. They're using our knowledge, our memories. They know where everyone lives. They know how to hurt you in ways you can't imagine." Before she could say more, the creature's body stiffened. The human awareness faded from her eyes, replaced by something cold and alien. She turned and walked away, joining a group of other converted humans who were working on constructing something that looked like a weapon. Dr. Foster's voice came through Jake's communicator. "Captain, you need to see this. I've been analyzing the alien technology. It's not just converting people, it's learning from them. Every human they capture adds to their knowledge base." Jake and his team made their way back to the landing shuttle, but not before seeing the full scope of what the aliens had done. The entire colony had been turned into a factory. Converted humans worked alongside alien creatures to build weapons and ships. But the worst part was that the humans were clearly still conscious, trapped inside their own bodies while being forced to help destroy their own species. Back on the Defiance, Jake connected with Admiral Collins to report their findings. The Admiral's face was grim as he listened to the report. "It's worse than we thought, Morrison. We've identified the attackers. They call themselves the Vorthack Dominion. Intelligence says they've been watching us for decades, studying our psychology and our weaknesses. What do they want? From what we can tell, they don't just want to conquer us, they want to harvest us. Turn us into living weapons to fight some war they're losing somewhere else in the galaxy." Jake felt sick. "How many more colonies have they hit?" 37 and counting. "They're moving fast, Captain, faster than we can respond. Our conventional weapons don't even scratch their ships. Energy blasts get absorbed and redirected back at us. Kinetic rounds just bounce off their hulls." "What about nuclear weapons?" "We tried that on the fleet attacking New Berlin. The aliens caught the missiles with some kind of living net and fed the energy into their ships, made them stronger." Jake stared out at the corrupted colony below. "So what do we do?" Admiral Collins was quiet for a long moment. "We're authorizing some experimental programs, Morrison. Things we hoped we'd never have to use. Report to Luna Base when you get back. There are some people there who want to talk to you." The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. He looked down at Kepler 442b, where 10,000 humans were being forced to build weapons that would be used against their own species. The aliens hadn't just attacked humanity. They had found a way to turn humans into accomplices in their own destruction. As the Defiance pulled away from the doomed colony, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Vorthack had been planning this invasion for decades. They knew humanity's strengths and weaknesses better than humans knew themselves. But what terrified Jake most was the look in that converted woman's eyes. She was still human enough to beg for help, but alien enough to be forced to betray her own species. If the Vorthack could do that to an entire colony in just a few hours, what could they do to all of humanity given enough time? The war had begun, and humanity was already losing. 6 months had passed since the first attack, and humanity was dying. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the briefing room on Luna Base, staring at the holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots marked the fallen colonies. There were too many to count. "We've lost half of our settlements," Admiral Collins said to the assembled officers. "The Vorthack aren't just conquering us, they're harvesting us. Every human they capture becomes a weapon against the rest of us." Commander Lisa Hayes raised her hand. "Sir, what about the colonies that went dark? The ones where we lost contact but haven't confirmed Vorthack presence?" Collins pressed a button, and the display changed. New images appeared showing the aftermath of recent attacks. "We sent reconnaissance teams to 12 of those colonies. What we found was worse than we imagined. The images showed massive organic structures covering entire cities. Human figures moved through the bio corridors, but they were wrong, changed. Their bodies had been twisted into new shapes, merged with alien technology that pulsed with sickly light. "They're not killing the civilians," Collins continued. "They're keeping them alive and turning them into living factories. The humans are still conscious, but they can't control their own bodies anymore. They're being forced to build ships and weapons to attack other human colonies." Jake felt his stomach turn. "How many people are we talking about?" "Conservative estimate. About 50 million humans have been converted so far. They know everything those people knew. Every military secret, every colony location, every weakness we have." The room fell silent. 50 million people trapped in their own bodies, forced to help destroy their own species. It was beyond nightmare. "What about our military response?" asked Colonel Steve Patterson, one of the few officers who had survived direct combat with the Vorthack. "Conventional weapons are useless," Collins replied. "The alien ships adapt to everything we throw at them. They're learning from every battle, getting stronger each time we fight them." "So what do?" Jake asked. "We can't just give up." Collins looked around the room. "President Rodriguez has authorized Operation Dark Mirror. It's a program we hoped we'd never have to use." A new man entered the room. He was tall and thin, with pale skin and dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "This is Dr. Richard Stone," Collins said. "He's been working on some experimental projects deep under the lunar surface. Dr. Stone, please explain what you've been developing." Dr. Stone activated a new display. Images of human bodies appeared, but they were wrong, enhanced, changed. "For the past 5 years, I've been working on human enhancement projects," Stone said. "Neural implants that connect directly to the brain, STEM. Synthetic organs that can replace human biology with something more efficient. Psychological conditioning that removes natural human limitations." "What kind of limitations?" Lisa asked. "Fear, hesitation, moral constraints that prevent humans from doing what's necessary to survive." Jake didn't like where this was heading. "You're talking about changing people, making them into something else." "Yes," Stone replied simply. "The Vorthack are using our humanity against us, our compassion, our unwillingness to cause unnecessary suffering. These traits make us weak in this war, but if we remove them, if we make humans into something more ruthless and efficient, we might have a chance." Colonel Patterson leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" Stone brought up new images. They showed human soldiers, but they moved differently. Faster. Their eyes held no warmth, no recognition of pain or fear. "We call them revenants," Stone explained. "Humans who have been modified to remove their emotional and moral limitations. They're faster, stronger, and more intelligent than baseline humans, but most importantly, they're willing to do whatever it takes to win." "Willing or programmed?" Jake asked. "Does it matter?" Stone replied. "The Vorthack are using our captured people to build weapons that will destroy us all. We need soldiers who can fight without hesitation, who can match the aliens' ruthlessness." Admiral Collins stood up. "The program is voluntary. We're asking for volunteers who are willing to undergo the modifications to save humanity." "What happens to them?" Lisa asked. "Do they stay human?" Stone was quiet for a moment. "They retain their memories and basic personality, but their emotional responses are different. They still care about human survival, but they're not limited by things like mercy or compassion when dealing with enemies." Jake thought about the converted humans on Kepler 442b, begging for help while being forced to build weapons. "How do we know this won't turn us into the same kind of monsters the Vorthack are?" "Because we'll be monsters by choice," Stone replied, "and we'll be our own monsters, not theirs." The room was silent for a long time. Finally, Jake spoke up. "I'll volunteer." "Captain, you don't have to do this," Lisa said. "Yes, I do. I've seen what the Vorthack do to people. I've seen entire colonies turned into weapons factories. If becoming something else is what it takes to stop them, then that's what I'll do." Over the next few days, more volunteers came forward. Soldiers who had lost their families to the Vorthack, civilians who had watched their friends get converted, people who had seen enough horror to accept that humanity might need to change to survive. The modification process took place in a facility deep beneath Luna's surface. Jake lay on a medical table while Dr. Stone and his team worked on him. The neural implants were the worst part. Thin wires that connected directly to his brain, allowing the artificial systems to override his natural responses. "You'll feel different when you wake up," Stone explained as the anesthesia took effect. "Don't fight it. The modifications are designed to help you think more clearly without emotional interference." When Jake woke up, the world looked different. Colors seemed sharper but also less important. He could see Lisa standing by his bed, but he felt no emotional connection to her. He remembered that they had been friends, but that friendship seemed like a distant memory from someone else's life. "How do you feel?" Stone asked. Jake considered the question. He felt efficient, like his mind had been cleaned of unnecessary thoughts and feelings. "Ready to work," he replied. Over the following weeks, Jake and the other volunteers underwent training. They learned to use their enhanced abilities to think and move faster than normal humans. But they also learned something else. They discovered that they enjoyed causing pain to their enemies in ways that their old selves would have found disturbing. During a training exercise, Jake found himself facing a holographic simulation of a Vorthack warrior. In the past, he would have tried to end the fight quickly and efficiently. Now he found himself exploring different ways to cause maximum psychological damage to the enemy. "Interesting," Dr. Stone said, watching from the observation deck. "The modifications aren't just removing human limitations. They're creating new capabilities." "What kind of capabilities?" Admiral Collins asked. "The ability to think like our enemies, to understand their psychology and use it against them. The Vorthack have been using human empathy as a weapon. Now we have soldiers who can turn that around." Jake completed his training and was assigned to lead the first Revenant unit into combat. As his team prepared for their mission, he found himself thinking about the conversion process. The old Jake Morrison would have been horrified by what he had become. But the old Jake Morrison had been weak, limited by human emotion and moral constraints. The new Jake Morrison was something else entirely. Something that could fight the Vorthack on their own terms and win. The mission briefing was simple. A Vorthack harvesting fleet was approaching the colony world of Haven's Rest. The revenants would intercept them and test their new capabilities in actual combat. As Jake's ship approached the battle zone, he felt something he hadn't experienced since his modifications. Not excitement exactly, but a cold anticipation. He was looking forward to seeing what he and his team could do to the aliens. The Vorthack had introduced humanity to a new kind of warfare. Now, it was time for humanity to return the favor. The first battle between the Revenants and the Vorthack took place above Mars. Jake Morrison led Alpha Squad and their modified assault ship, watching the alien biovessels approach the Red Planet's orbital stations. The Vorthack ships pulsed with dark energy, their organic hulls writhing through space like diseased organs. "Remember," Jake said to his team over the communication system, "we're not just here to destroy them, we're here to make them afraid." The other Revenants nodded. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Patterson checked his weapons. Sergeant Karen Lewis ran diagnostics on the ship's new biowarfare systems. These weren't the same people who had volunteered for the program. The modifications had changed them into something else entirely. The battle began when the Vorthack ships opened fire. Their energy weapons had destroyed human fleets for months. But this time, something different happened. The Revenant ships didn't dodge or defend. They flew straight into the alien fire, their enhanced hulls absorbing the energy and converting it into power for their own weapons. Jake's ship slammed into the side of a Vorthack biovessel. Instead of bouncing off like human weapons usually did, the ship tore through the alien hull like it was made of paper. The Revenants had learned to build their weapons from studying captured Vorthack technology, but they had made improvements the aliens never thought of. "Boarding successful," Jake reported, moving to Phase 2. The interior of the Vorthack ship was a nightmare of living corridors and pulsing walls. Converted humans worked alongside alien creatures, building weapons and maintaining the ship's organic systems. When they saw the revenants, the converted humans tried to attack, but their movements were slow and predictable. Jake moved through the ship's corridors with inhuman speed. His enhanced reflexes let him dodge attacks that would have killed a normal human. But it wasn't his physical abilities that made him deadly. It was his complete lack of hesitation. When Jake encountered a group of converted humans, he didn't try to save them or put them out of their misery quickly. Instead, he studied them. He watched how they moved, how they reacted to pain, how their alien modifications worked. Then he began to experiment. "Interesting," Jake said, holding a device he had taken from a Vorthack technician. "This controls the neural interface that connects the converted humans to the ship's systems." Steve Patterson joined him. "Can we use it to free them?" "Free them?" Jake looked at his second-in-command with cold eyes. "Why would we want to do that?" Instead of freeing the converted humans, Jake began to reprogram their neural interfaces. He introduced new commands that caused the converted humans to turn on their Vorthack controllers. But he didn't stop there. He programmed them to do it, slowly, painfully, while broadcasting their actions to the rest of the ship. The effect on the Vorthack crew was immediate. The aliens had never experienced psychological warfare before. They were used to converting other species quickly and efficiently. They weren't prepared for the sight of their own weapons turning against them in ways designed to cause maximum terror. "This is Alpha Squad," Jake reported back to command. "Phase 2 complete. The Vorthack are showing signs of panic, moving to Phase 3. Phase 3 was the most disturbing part of the Revenant tactics. Jake and his team began to systematically capture Vorthack crew members, but instead of killing them, they connected them to the ship's own bio-neural network and began to broadcast specific images and sensations directly into the alien collective consciousness. The images weren't random. Dr. Stone's research had identified specific psychological triggers that would cause maximum distress to the Vorthack species. The Revenants used these triggers to introduce concepts that the aliens had never experienced before. Fear, doubt, the possibility of individual death. "Target ship is broadcasting distress signals," Karen Lewis reported. "The other Vorthack vessels are responding, but they're moving erratically." Jake smiled, though the expression held no warmth. "They're learning what it feels like to be afraid." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The Vorthack ships, which had moved with perfect coordination for months, began to make mistakes. Some ships fired on their own allies. Others retreated when they should have advanced. The alien collective consciousness was being poisoned by the fear and confusion that the Revenants were broadcasting into their network. But the most disturbing part wasn't what the Revenants were doing to the aliens. It was how much they were enjoying it. Steve Patterson moved through the Vorthack ship like an artist working on a masterpiece. He had captured several alien technicians and was using them to send specific psychological attacks to different parts of the enemy fleet. He took careful notes on which attacks were most effective, refining his techniques with each experiment. "This is fascinating," he said to Jake. "Look at how they react when I introduce the concept of personal mortality. Their entire species has been part of a collective consciousness for so long that the idea of individual death is completely foreign to them." Jake watched as Steve continued his work. The old Steve Patterson had been a career soldier, professional and efficient. This new version was something else entirely. He approached psychological warfare with the same enthusiasm that a scientist might approach a new discovery. "Are you getting all this recorded?" Jake asked Karen Lewis. "Every detail," she replied. "Dr. Stone will want to study our methods for training future Revenant units." The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Vorthack fleet, but not through conventional weapons. The aliens had destroyed themselves, driven to panic and confusion by the psychological attacks. Some ships had turned their weapons on each other. Others had self-destructed rather than continue experiencing the terror that the Revenants were broadcasting into their minds. When the Revenants returned to base, they found a crowd of regular human soldiers and civilians waiting for them. The battle had been broadcast live to military command, and word had spread quickly through the human colonies. The crowd wasn't cheering. "What did you do to them?" asked Dr. Amanda Foster, the xenobiologist who had studied the first Vorthack attacks. We watched the recordings. That wasn't a battle, that was torture. Jake looked at her with the same cold expression he had worn during the fight. We won. That's what matters. You made them suffer, she continued. You could have destroyed them quickly, but you chose to make them experience psychological agony first. And, Jake replied, they've been doing worse to our people for months. They've converted 50 million humans into living weapons. They've turned our own families against us. Why should we show them mercy? Dr. Foster stared at him. Because that's what makes us human. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, that cold, empty smile again. I'm not human anymore. That's the point. The crowd began to disperse, but Jake could see the fear in their eyes. They were afraid of the Vorthack, but now they were also afraid of their own protectors. Over the following weeks, more revenant units were deployed against Vorthack forces throughout human space. The results were always the same. Complete victory for humanity, but at a cost that was becoming increasingly difficult to justify. The revenants didn't just defeat the aliens. They systematically destroyed their psychology, introducing concepts of fear and individual mortality into a species that had never experienced such things. They turned the Vorthack's own biotechnology against them, using captured aliens to broadcast terror into the collective consciousness. But the most disturbing development was how the revenants were changing over time. Each battle made them more creative in their cruelty. They began to see psychological warfare as an art form, competing with each other to develop new ways to cause mental anguish to their enemies. Admiral Collins watched the reports with growing concern. The revenants were winning the war, but they were becoming something that humanity might not be able to control. They still followed orders, but their methods were becoming increasingly brutal and creative. Dr. Stone, Collins said during a private meeting, are we sure we can trust them? Stone looked at the battle reports. They're doing exactly what we designed them to do. They're winning the war. But are they still human? Stone was quiet for a long moment. Does it matter? The alternative is extinction. Collins stared out at the stars, wondering if humanity's survival was worth the price they were paying. The revenants were saving the human race, but they were also changing what it meant to be human in the first place. Dr. Richard Stone stood in his underground laboratory on Luna, staring at the massive biocomputer he had spent months building. The device was part machine, part living tissue, created from studying captured Vorthack technology. But Stone had improved on the alien design in ways that would have horrified the original creators. It's ready, he announced to Admiral Collins and the assembled Revenant commanders. The Omega virus. Jake Morrison looked at the pulsing biocomputer with interest. His enhanced mind could process information faster than any normal human, and he immediately understood what Stone had created. You've weaponized human consciousness. Exactly, Stone replied. The Vorthack operate through a collective consciousness. Every ship, every weapon, every converted human is connected to their central overmind. If we can introduce the right kind of psychological virus into that network, we can destroy them from the inside. Commander Lisa Hayes, who had volunteered for the Revenant program after watching Jake's transformation, studied the technical specifications. What kind of virus? The kind that attacks the foundations of thought itself, Stone explained. The Vorthack have never experienced individual consciousness. They don't understand concepts like self-doubt, personal fear, or existential questioning. This virus will introduce those concepts directly into their collective mind. Admiral Collins frowned. Are we talking about psychological warfare or something more? Something much more? Jake said, his cold eyes fixed on the biocomputer. We're talking about teaching them how to hate themselves. Stone nodded. The virus contains concentrated human experiences, memories of doubt, depression, self-hatred, and despair. When it enters the Vorthack collective, it will spread like a disease, causing individual Vorthack to question their existence and their connection to the overmind. How do we deliver it? Asked Colonel Steve Patterson. We need to get inside their mothership, Stone replied. the bioconstruct that serves as the central node for their entire fleet. If we can introduce the virus there, it will spread throughout their entire galactic empire. The mothership was a massive biostructure orbiting a dead star in the Tau Ceti system. It was the size of Earth's moon, a living organism that served as the brain for the entire Vorthack Dominion. Getting inside would be suicide for normal humans, but the revenants weren't normal humans anymore. Jake led the infiltration team aboard a specially modified ship that could mimic Vorthack biosignatures. The team included Steve Patterson, Karen, Lewis, and 12 other revenants who had shown exceptional creativity in psychological warfare. "Remember," Jake said as they approached the mothership, "we're not just delivering a virus. We're fundamentally changing what the Vorthack species is. After today, they'll never be the same." The mothership's interior was unlike anything the revenants had seen before. Instead of corridors and rooms, there were vast organic chambers filled with flowing bio-neural fluid. Thousands of Vorthack floated in the fluid, their consciousness merged with the ship's living computer systems. "This is beautiful," Steve Patterson said, studying the alien technology. "Look how efficiently they've merged biological and technological systems. Too bad we're here to destroy it." The team moved through the ship's organic passages, following the flow of bio-neural fluid toward the central processing core. Along the way, they planted virus nodes at key neural junction points. Each node was designed to introduce specific psychological concepts into the Vorthack collective consciousness. "Node 7 is active," Karen Lewis reported. "I'm seeing immediate responses from the local biosystems. The Vorthack in this section are showing signs of confusion." Jake watched as several Vorthack technicians stopped their work and began to float aimlessly in the bio-neural fluid. Their usual coordinated movements had been replaced by jerky, uncertain actions. They're experiencing doubt for the first time in their species' history. The effect spread quickly. As more virus nodes came online, entire sections of the mothership began to malfunction. The collective consciousness that had guided the Vorthack for millions of years was being poisoned by concepts it had never encountered before. "This is incredible," Steve said, monitoring the ship's neural activity. "Look at these readings. The virus isn't just introducing new thoughts. It's creating recursive loops of self-analysis. They're beginning to question everything they've ever believed." The team reached the central processing core, a massive chamber filled with hundreds of thousands of Vorthack minds connected in perfect unity. The bio-neural fluid here was thicker, more concentrated, carrying the thoughts and memories of the entire Dominion. "This is it," Jake said, preparing the final virus payload. "Once we introduce this into the core, every Vorthack in the galaxy will be infected." But as Jake prepared to release the virus, something unexpected happened. The collective consciousness spoke to him directly, its voice echoing inside his enhanced mind. "Why do you do this?" the voice asked. "We seek only survival. We flee from something far worse than ourselves." Jake paused, but only for a moment. "Because you chose to make us your enemy. We chose nothing. We are driven by fear of the darkness that follows us, the entities that consume entire galaxies. We thought to make you strong enough to help us fight them. By converting our people into weapons, by giving them purpose beyond their brief individual lives. You do not understand what approaches. When the darkness comes, individual consciousness is weakness. Only the collective can survive." Jake felt something he hadn't experienced since his modifications began. Curiosity. What darkness? Images flooded his mind. Vast entities that existed between dimensions, feeding on the consciousness of entire species. Galaxies stripped bare of all thought and memory. The Vorthack fleeing from world to world, always one step ahead of something that could not be fought with conventional weapons. "This is why we harvest," the voice continued. "Each species we absorb makes the collective stronger. Your species' creativity and resilience could help us survive what is coming." Jake processed this information with his enhanced analytical abilities. The Vorthack weren't conquerors, they were refugees, but it didn't matter. "You should have asked. Instead of taking," he said, and released the virus into the central core. The effect was immediate and devastating. The collective consciousness that had spoken to him began to fragment. Individual Vorthack throughout the chamber started to experience personal identity for the first time. They began to question their connection to the collective, to doubt the wisdom of their leaders, to fear for their individual survival. But the virus did more than create doubt. It introduced human concepts of betrayal, abandonment, and existential despair. The Vorthack collective, which had operated on perfect trust and unity for millions of years, suddenly experienced the full range of human psychological dysfunction. "My God," Karen Lewis whispered, watching the readings. "They're turning on each other." Throughout the mothership, individual Vorthack began to attack their former collective mates. The virus had taught them to see other members of their species as threats to their newly discovered individual existence. The bioneural connections that had linked them for eons became sources of paranoia and fear. "The virus is spreading beyond the mothership," Steve reported. "I'm picking up similar disturbances from Vorthack fleets throughout the galaxy." Jake watched as the greatest collective consciousness in galactic history tore itself apart. The Vorthack were experiencing every negative aspect of individual thought at once: depression, anxiety, paranoia, self-hatred, and existential terror flooded through their network. But as the team prepared to leave the dying mothership, Jake felt something else enter his mind. Fragments of memory from the collective consciousness. Images of the cosmic horror that had driven the Vorthack to flee across the galaxy. The entities were real. Vast intelligences that existed beyond normal space and time, feeding on the thoughts and dreams of entire civilizations. They had already consumed dozens of galaxies, and they were moving toward this one. "We need to go," Jake said urgently. "Now." The team escaped as the mothership began to tear itself apart. Throughout Vorthack space, the same scene was playing out. The virus had spread through their quantum-linked consciousness, introducing concepts that were literally driving them insane. Some Vorthack ships turned their weapons on themselves. Others began attacking former allies. The massive bioconstructs that had served as weapons and habitats started to consume their own crews as individual Vorthack competed for resources they had previously shared freely. Back at Human Command, Admiral Collins received reports of Vorthack fleets destroying each other throughout the galaxy. "It's working," he said. "The virus has broken their collective consciousness." But Jake stared out at the stars with new knowledge burning in his enhanced mind. The Vorthack had been running from something worse than themselves. Something that would arrive eventually, whether the Vorthack were gone or not. "Sir," Jake said to Collins, "we need to prepare for something else. The Vorthack weren't the real threat, they were just the first wave." Collins looked at him with concern. "What do you mean?" Jake shared the memories he had absorbed from the collective consciousness, images of cosmic entities that devoured entire galaxies, beings that existed beyond normal understanding, feeding on consciousness itself. 2 years after the last Vorthack ship had destroyed itself, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above Earth. The planet below looked different now. The blue oceans reflected a red sky, tinted by the atmospheric changes the revenants had made to better suit their enhanced biology. "The reconstruction is proceeding ahead of schedule," reported Commander Lisa Hayes, her voice carrying the same cold efficiency that all revenants now possessed. "We've established control over 67 former Vorthack territories." Jake nodded, studying the reports on his tablet. The numbers were impressive. Humanity had not only survived the war, they had inherited an empire spanning half the galaxy. Former Vorthack colonies had been converted into human settlements, their alien populations either enslaved or eliminated, depending on their usefulness. "What about the resistance movements?" Jake asked. "The baseline humans are still causing problems on some worlds," Lisa replied. "They object to our efficiency protocols and population management systems." Admiral Collins, one of the few unmodified humans still in command, shifted uncomfortably. He had aged rapidly over the past 2 years, the stress of watching humanity transform into something unrecognizable taking its toll. "Jake, we need to talk about the civilian protests," Collins said. "The baseline populations are becoming increasingly hostile to Revenant administration." Jake turned to look at the Admiral with his cold, emotionless eyes. Define hostile. They're calling for the restoration of pre-war government structures. They want a return to the old system of individual rights and democratic decision-making. That system was inefficient, Jake replied. It led to the near extinction of our species. But it was human, Collins said quietly. Jake studied the Admiral for a moment. Collins had been useful during the war, but his attachment to outdated concepts was becoming problematic. Admiral, your emotional responses are interfering with your judgment. Perhaps it's time you considered joining the enhancement program. Collins stepped back. I won't become one of you. Then you'll become irrelevant, Jake said simply. The conversation was interrupted by Colonel Steve Patterson, who entered the room carrying a data pad. His revenant modifications had progressed beyond the original specifications, his body now more machine than human. We've received a response from the deep space transmission, Steve announced. 3 months earlier, the revenants had detected a signal from beyond the galaxy. Using technology captured from the Vorthack, they had traced it to its source and sent a reply. The message they received back had been disturbing even by revenant standards. What did they say? Jake asked. Steve activated the holographic display. Images appeared showing vast cosmic entities moving between galaxies like living storms. The beings were incomprehensible in their size and power, existing partially outside normal space-time. They call themselves the Harvest Lords, Steve explained. They're the cosmic entities that were chasing the Vorthack. They've been watching our war with interest. The recording began to play. The voice that spoke was not human, but it used human language with disturbing familiarity. Greetings, young harvesters, the voice said. We have observed your conflict with the Vorthack Collective. Your methods were impressive. The introduction of psychological corruption into a collective consciousness shows remarkable creativity. Jake felt something that might have been satisfaction, though his enhanced mind processed it as simple recognition of efficiency. You have demonstrated the qualities we seek in a species worthy of Ascension, the voice continued. The Vorthack were useful, but limited by their collective nature. You have shown the ability to embrace individual cruelty while maintaining species-level coordination. Admiral Collins felt sick. They're congratulating us for becoming monsters. They're recognizing our superiority, Jake corrected. The message continued. We offer you membership in the ranks of the Harvest Lords. Your species has proven capable of the moral flexibility necessary for galactic cultivation. Accept our guidance, and you will join us in preparing the next galaxy for processing. The hologram showed coordinates to a distant galaxy, along with technical specifications for ships capable of intergalactic travel. The Harvest Lords were offering humanity the chance to become cosmic predators, moving from galaxy to galaxy and harvesting civilizations for resources. What's our response? Steve asked. Jake looked out at Earth, its red-tinted atmosphere now, perfect for the enhanced human physiology. Orbital shipyards were already constructing vessels using hybrid human Vorthack technology. The new ships were designed not for exploration or defense, but for systematic conquest and population processing. We accept, Jake said. Collins stared at him in horror. You're talking about becoming exactly what the Vorthack were, traveling from world to world, converting or destroying entire civilizations. The Vorthack were inefficient, Jake replied. They maintained some attachment to their original biology and psychology. We've moved beyond such limitations. You've moved beyond humanity itself. Jake turned to face Collins directly. Good. Humanity was weak. Humanity almost got itself extinct because it couldn't make the hard choices necessary for survival. Over the following months, the Revenant Council implemented sweeping changes across human space. Baseline humans were categorized based on their genetic potential and psychological profiles. Those suitable for enhancement were given the choice to join the Revenant ranks or accept supervised breeding programs. Those deemed unsuitable were assigned to labor colonies or elimination protocols. Dr. Amanda Foster, now working in an underground resistance movement, managed to send out a final broadcast before her capture. Her message was intercepted by revenant forces, but not before it reached several baseline human settlements. "This is Dr. Foster speaking to any remaining free humans," she said. "What we've become is not evolution, it's extinction. The beings calling themselves revenants aren't human anymore. There's something else wearing human faces. They've taken our capacity for compassion, for love, for everything that made us worth preserving in the first place. They saved our species by destroying our souls. If anyone receives this message, remember what we used to be. Remember that humans once valued individual life, that we once believed in mercy and justice and hope." The broadcast was cut short as revenant forces located her transmission point. Dr. Foster was captured and processed through the enhancement program, her resistance useful for studying methods to overcome baseline human psychological defenses. Jake reviewed the interrogation reports with interest. The baseline humans still clung to concepts that the revenants had discarded as evolutionary dead ends: compassion, individual rights, emotional attachment to non-productive individuals. "It's fascinating how they resist logical solutions, Steve," Patterson observed. "Even when faced with extinction, they choose inefficiency over survival. They choose to remain weak," Jake corrected. "We've moved beyond such limitations." The first intergalactic harvesting ships launched 6 months later. Massive biomechanical constructs capable of processing entire star systems into raw materials for further expansion. The ships carried crews of enhanced humans who had volunteered for the ultimate modification: complete integration with the ship's biological systems. Jake stood in the command center as the first fleet departed for the Andromeda Galaxy. The ships moved through space like living predators, their biomechanical hulls adapting to the cosmic radiation of intergalactic void. "ETA to target galaxy is 47 years, reported the fleet commander, her voice transmitted through the ship's bio-neural network. "We'll begin cultivation protocols upon arrival." Admiral Collins, now confined to a rehabilitation facility for psychologically unsuitable individuals, watched the launch through a small window. Tears ran down his face as he realized what humanity had become. The beings that called themselves human were no longer recognizable as the species that had once dreamed of exploring the stars in peace. They had become something that their ancestors would have fought to destroy. But Jake Morrison, standing in his command center surrounded by the achievements of post-human civilization, felt only satisfaction. Humanity had faced extinction and chosen to become something stronger, something more efficient, something capable of surviving in a universe that rewarded only the most ruthless predators. The old humanity had been weak, limited by compassion and moral constraints. The new humanity had discarded such inefficiencies and embraced their role as cosmic harvesters. As the ships disappeared into the intergalactic void, Jake began planning for the next phase of expansion. There were billions of worlds in Andromeda, trillions of potential subjects for processing and enhancement. The universe was vast, but humanity now had infinite time to claim it all. The last message from the Harvest Lords arrived as the fleet reached the edge of the galaxy. "Welcome to Ascension," it said. "The harvest never ends." Jake smiled his cold, empty smile and began preparations for humanity's eternal war against compassion, mercy, and everything they had once called good.